The void remembered with teeth. Commander Eva Rostova felt the attack coming in the vibration of her command chair. It was a subtle grinding resonance that traveled through the deck plates of the patrol cruiser Vigilance. Her ship, a tiny fleck of lawful order in the cosmic dust of the Veil of Shards, was cornered. 3 pirate cruisers bloated with stolen armor and bristling with illegal kinetic launchers were closing vectors on her position. They were hounds, and she was the fox run to ground. The stakes were simple and brutal. Survival was a flickering hope. Duty was a burning iron. Across the command bridge, the low, steady hum of the ship's vital systems was a counterpoint to the rising tension. Near the forward viewport, a crystalline shard of a long-dead Dyson sphere tumbled slowly, catching the light of a distant pulsar, in a hypnotic, rhythmic flash, a silent metronome counting down their final moments. Within that shard, something ancient slept its own arrays, dreaming of a different time. "Magister, give me a solution." Rostova ordered, her voice calm and even. She kept her gaze fixed on the main holographic display where the enemy icons glowed a malevolent red. Her reflection stared back from the polished obsidian of the console, a woman etched with the weariness of a long patrol. The ship's AI Magister responded without inflection, its synthesized voice a cascade of pure logic. "The probability of our survival against the hostile force is 3.7%. A kinetic volley is anticipated in 97 seconds. The recommended course of action is to surrender." The AI's avatar, a simple pulsating sphere of blue light, shimmered beside the tactical display. It offered no comfort, only calculus. "That which cannot be counted cannot be weighed. That is not a solution, Magister. That is a conclusion." Rostova countered, her knuckles white where she gripped the armrest. "Give me options for engagement." She would not surrender her ship or her crew to the scrappers' butchers who sold their captives for scrap parts and nutrient paste. Her duty was to uphold the accord, and the accord did not bend to pirates. Lieutenant Commander Jian Li, her tactical officer, spoke up from his station. "Commander, their firing solutions are nearly locked. They're boxing us in against the crystalline anomaly. We have one escape vector, but it's a narrow channel through the densest part of the shard field. A high-risk maneuver." His fingers danced across his console, tracing potential paths through the glittering debris. The air tasted of ozone from the overworked processors. "And the anomaly?" Rostova asked, her eyes drawn to the immense shard of crystal and metal dominating the viewport. It was kilometers long, a broken tooth from a god's jaw. Strange energy readings had brought them here, a faint rhythmic pulse that defied known physics. It was a mystery, tucked away in a graveyard of a forgotten civilization. It was a song that remembered the singer. Dr. Aris Thorne, the civilian xenohistorian, attached to her command, leaned forward from his post, his face illuminated by the glow of his own screen. "Commander, the energy signature is not natural. It's a containment field, ancient but stable. The sigils my probes have identified on the structure's surface. They are consistent with first expansion period humanity, specifically a Ledger Saint-class vessel." He spoke with a reverence that always set Rostova on edge. Legends were for history books, not for tactical briefings. A low chuckle came over the comms, a distorted, arrogant sound. It was Kalen, the leader of this scrapper pack. "Patrol ship, Vigilance, you are trespassing. This claim belongs to us. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. We might even let your crew live if your ship's core is worth the trouble." The threat was plain, unadorned. It was the law of the void, the law of the strong. Rostova ignored him. "Thorn, a saint ship. You mean a ghost story?" The tales were infamous, colossal archive ships from humanity's dawn, vessels that were both warship and courthouse adjudicating cosmic law with terrifying impartiality. They were relics, myths. Yet the rhythmic pulse from the shard, felt like a slow, deep breath. A truth does not cease to be true when it is forgotten. A myth with a functioning power signature. Commander Thorne insisted, his voice tight with excitement. The legends say they don't awaken by force. They awaken for a cause, for a precedent. They are arbiters. The civilian freighter Stardust Drifter had been just 3 light hours from the Veil when the scrappers hit it. The family running the ship, a couple with 2 young children, were hauling medical supplies to an outer colony. They sent a single garbled distress call before their comms were silenced. Rostova had answered the call knowing it was a trap, because that was her job. Now their ghosts haunted the tactical display, a silent accusation against the brutality of this lawless space. The ledger remembers every debt. Kalen is not just hunting us, Aris Rostova said, her mind racing. He's using us as cover. He's been trying to crack that thing open. The energy spikes we tracked weren't just from the relic. They were from his mining charges. The pieces clicked into place. The scrappers weren't just pirates. They were tomb robbers, and they were about to wake up something far beyond their understanding. 80 seconds to kinetic impact, Magister announced calmly. The blue sphere of its avatar pulsed a placid digital heartbeat. Rostova made a decision. It was not based on a 3.7% chance of survival. It was based on a sliver of something else, a filament of hope so thin it was almost imaginary. Jian plot a course to within 1,000 meters of the anomaly's surface. Divert all non-essential power to the forward shields. Thorne open a wide-beam channel to the anomaly. Use the protocols you found. All of them. A law is a promise etched in light. Commander, that's insane, Jian protested, his eyes wide. The energy feedback could fry our systems. The debris field alone. Do it. Lieutenant Rostova commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Her gaze was locked on the crystalline structure. She was a guardian of the law. If this relic was a true arbiter, then it would recognize its own. If it was just a rock, they would die with their duty fulfilled. As the Vigilance began its desperate final maneuver, the ship shuddering under the strain of its engines, Thorne began the broadcast. He sent no message, no plea for help. Instead, he transmitted the ship's official ledger, their patrol logs, their adherence to the Accord, every rescue mission, every pirate suppressed, every civilian life saved. It was their history, their proof of service. It was their soul laid bare in lines of code and formal reports. He who judges must first be judged. 50 seconds, Magister intoned. The scrapper ships adjusted their course, their engines flaring as they moved to intercept. They saw her move as a final desperate act of a cornered animal. They did not see the gambit for what it was. The rhythmic pulse from the anomaly began to change. The steady, slow beat quickened. A low hum filled the bridge, resonating not through the deck plates, but directly in their bones. The light from the distant pulsar seemed to dim as the crystalline shard began to glow with its own internal luminescence. A soft silver light that pushed back the darkness. A sleeping giant hears the whisper of its name. On the main screen, jagged lines of light spiderwebbed across the surface of the anomaly. It was not breaking under the strain of some internal pressure. It was unfolding. Massive crystalline plates shifted and retracted, revealing a hull of burnished pearlescent metal underneath. It was a ship. A ship of impossible scale, shaped less like a vessel and more like a cathedral dedicated to some forgotten god of geometry. Impact in 30 seconds, Magister said. Its placid blue light began to flicker, a sign of its processing load reaching unprecedented levels. Anomaly energy output is increasing exponentially. I cannot model this. You don't have to. Rostova whispered, a sense of profound awe washing over her. Just record it. The ancient ship was awake, and it was looking at them. A vow is stronger than a shield. Arrays that had been dormant for millennia warmed to life, their surfaces shimmering like mother of pearl. A focused energy beam, not a weapon, but a carrier wave, lanced out and enveloped the vigilance. Data flooded their systems, a torrent of information so vast it would have overloaded a lesser AI. But Magister held it, parsed it, translated it. It was not a greeting. It was a question. A single line of text appeared on the main holographic display, written in the stark, elegant script of the first expansion. Query state the precedent for intervention in a conflict between lawbearer and lawbreaker, where the lawbearer faces certain destruction. It was a test, a legal query, a challenge. The ancient mind wanted to know who they were, not by their technology or their weapons, but by their understanding of justice. A mirror shows not the face, but the intention. Before them, the scrapper fleet commander Kalen must have seen the incredible awakening. His comms channel crackled back to life, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance, replaced by a raw, naked greed. "Whatever that is, it's mine. That prize will make me a king." His ships opened fire. A storm of kinetic slugs, massive chunks of metal accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light, raced toward the vigilance. Time seemed to slow. Rostova saw the incoming fire as streaks of incandescent fury. She had a choice. She could answer the relic's question, or she could try to evade the inevitable. Her duty was clear. The law was not a shield to hide behind. It was a light to follow even into oblivion. A debt cannot be paid with an empty hand. "Thorn," she said, her voice a paradigm of command. "Formulate the response. Cite Accord Case Law 734, the doctrine of proportional intervention. A lawful authority facing annihilation from a lawless force may be aided by any signatory power to restore balance, not to grant victory." It was a fine distinction, a legal razor's edge. Intervention was not about winning the fight for someone. It was about ensuring the fight was fair. "Magister, transmit our answer," Rostova ordered. "Gian, brace for impact." She closed her eyes, ready for the end. She had held the line. She had done her duty. But the impact never came. The ancient ship, the anchorite, moved. It did not move like a vessel pushing against the void. It moved like the void itself, rearranging its own fabric. One moment it was a stationary colossus. The next it was a wall of pearlescent armor between the vigilance and the kinetic slugs. The projectiles, each carrying the force of a tactical nuclear weapon, struck its hull. There was no explosion. No flash. The slugs simply vanished. They were absorbed, their kinetic energy consumed without a trace. The hull of the anchorite did not even shimmer. Silence is the verdict of true power. A new line of text appeared on their screen. Precedent accepted. Standing confirmed. The ledger is open. The bridge of the vigilance was silent. The only sound, the soft hum of life support. Gian stared at his tactical display, his mouth agape. They're gone. The slugs. They're just gone. No energy signature, no radiation, no debris. Nothing. Dr. Thorne was weeping silently, tears tracking through the gray stubble on his cheeks. "It's real. It's all real." He looked at Rostova, his eyes shining with a fanatic's light. "Commander, it has accepted our standing. We are clients." "What does that mean?" Aris Rostova asked, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath her feet. "The first step on a new path is the most dangerous." "It means we have its attention," he replied, composing himself. "It has judged us as lawbearers. It will now weigh the actions of the lawbreakers. This is not a battle anymore, Commander. This is a trial." Out in the void, the anchorite turned its attention to the scrapper fleet. It did not deploy weapons in any conventional sense. No energy beams lanced out, no missiles were launched. Instead, a wave of energy, subtle and shimmering, expanded from its hull. It was a sensor wave of unimaginable fidelity. Kalen's ships were bathed in it, their systems scanned, their histories dissected. Kalen's voice, now laced with panic, screamed over the open channel. "What is this? My systems are... It's reading my logs. All of them." Understood too late. The anchorite was not a warship in the way he understood it. It was a court. A judgment is a weapon that cuts both ways. Aboard a scrapper vessel, a young deckhand named Rorik watched his console flicker and die. He had signed on for a quick payday, a chance to escape the debt that had crushed his family. He'd loaded the kinetic slugs himself that morning, his hands steady. Now a strange peace settled over him as the ship's lights went out one by one and a single elegant line of alien text burned itself onto his screen. It was an accounting of his ship's crimes. The stolen cargo, the murdered crews, the number of lives extinguished tallied with chilling precision. Then came the verdict from the ancient ship. It appeared on the main screen of the Vigilance and presumably on every ship in the scrapper fleet. The accused are found guilty of violations against the unwritten laws of sentient interaction, theft of life, theft of prosperity, theft of peace. The debt is called. The anchorite began to glow, not with the soft silver of its awakening, but with a hard, brilliant gold. The kinetic energy it had absorbed from the scrapper's own attack was now being repurposed. It was not a brute force weapon. It was an instrument of perfect, terrifying justice. A mirror reflects the justice you bring to it. The space around Kalen's flagship, the Ravager, began to warp. The ship's own mass was turned against it. Gravity twisted, pulling the vessel in on itself. Bulkheads groaned, armor plates buckled, and with a final silent implosion, the ship was crushed into a compact, incandescent sphere of superheated matter. The energy of its own kinetic weapons had been used to execute it. The other two scrapper cruisers suffered a similar but distinct fate. The energy wave from the anchorite targeted their power cores. It did not overload them. It contained them, severing their connection to the rest of their ships. The vessels went dark and cold, adrift in the void. Their engines were dead, their life support failing, their crews left to contemplate their crimes in the silent dark. Their ability to do harm had been surgically removed. The count of sins determines the weight of the chain. Rostova watched her hands gripping the command chair so tightly her knuckles ached. This was not warfare. This was an execution. It was clean, precise, and utterly terrifying in its efficiency. Magister's avatar pulsed rapidly. The hostile vessels have been neutralized. 1 destroyed, 2 disabled. The methods used are inconsistent with any known physical principles. I am unable to reconcile this event with my understanding of the universe. For the first time, Rostova heard a hint of something other than pure logic in the AI's voice. It sounded like awe. "It teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers," Thorn whispered, his voice filled with a profound understanding. "It never uses collars. It doesn't need to. It simply balances the books." This was the core of its doctrine, a piece of lore he had once considered mere poetry. Now he saw it as a literal truth. A law unenforced is only advice. With the immediate threat gone, a new and far heavier weight settled upon Eva Rostova. She was no longer just the commander of a small patrol ship. She was now the de facto liaison to a power that could rewrite physics to enforce its concept of justice. She had awakened a god from its slumber, and now she was responsible for it. The scrappers were just the beginning. The jurists, the legalistic faction that wanted all such relics destroyed, would surely have detected this awakening. They feared the absolute judgment of the past, for it would find their own hands unclean. "Magister," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. "What is the status of the disabled scrapper vessels?" "Life support is failing. Estimated crew survival time is 4 hours," the AI replied. They are hailing us, requesting aid. They are surrendering. Here was her first test as the client of this ancient arbiter. Kalen and his flagship had been beyond redemption, their crimes too great. But what of the crews on the other ships? Were they all monsters, or were some of them desperate souls like the deckhand, Rorik, who had made a bad choice? What was the lawful, the right thing to do? A ruler is measured by the mercy he shows to the fallen. "Jen, prepare a rescue operation," Rostova ordered. "Send boarding parties to the disabled vessels. We will take the crews into custody. They will be treated as prisoners of war under Accord statutes. Provide medical aid where necessary." Commander Jian asked, surprised. "After what they did, they are disarmed and defeated," Rostova stated firmly. "The law protects them now. We are not butchers. We are officers of the Accord." She looked toward the silent, titanic form of the anchorite. "And we are being watched." She had to show the ancient mind that they were worthy of its power, that their justice was tempered with mercy. She had to prove they understood the difference between punishment and cruelty. As her crews prepared for the rescue mission, a new communication came from the anchorite. It was not a query this time. It was a statement. The lawbearer's choice is recorded. The ledger acknowledges the distinction. A new precedent is set. Mercy is a function of strength. Your standing is affirmed. A subtle warmth spread through the bridge of the vigilance. It was the faintest touch of approval from the ancient ship, a silent acknowledgement that she had passed another more difficult test. The cost was high. She was now linked to this relic for better or worse. Her simple patrol mission was over. A far more complex and dangerous journey had just begun. The burden of power is weighed in choices, not in victories. Just then, a klaxon blared from Jian's console. "Commander, multiple warp signatures detected at the edge of the system. They are not scrappers. Their energy profiles are pristine. Military grade. They're broadcasting Jurist Federation codes." Rostova's blood ran cold. The Jurists. They had arrived far faster than she had anticipated. They were a powerful faction within the greater Galactic community, obsessed with legal purity and terrified of ancient uncontrollable powers like the one now floating beside her ship. They would not see the anchorite as an arbiter of justice. They would see it as a chaotic element, a threat to their meticulously ordered and sterile version of the law. A fear of the dark blinds one to the light. On the main screen, a dozen sleek silver warships dropped out of warp, their forms sharp and predatory. They arranged themselves in a perfect blockade formation, their weapons ports already glowing with latent energy. A transmission came through, crisp and authoritarian. "This is Proctor Marshal Valerius of the Jurist Federation Fleet. By the authority of the Edict of Containment, the anomalous vessel is declared a Class 1 existential threat. The crew of the Vigilance will surrender their vessel and their client status immediately for adjudication. Failure to comply will be met with overwhelming force." The ultimatum was clear. There was no room for negotiation. The jurists saw the law not as a living set of precedents to be interpreted, but as a static, immutable text to be enforced. To them, the anchorite was heresy, and Eva Rostova was its high priestess. She stood between the letter of the law and its spirit. "Magister Rostova," said, her voice low and tight. "Give me the odds now." The AI's blue sphere pulsed. "The Jurist fleet outguns us by a factor of 20 to 1. Our combined force, including the estimated capabilities of the vessel anchorite, still results in a survival probability of less than 19%. However, this calculation is based on conventional metrics. The anchorite is unconventional." Rostova looked at the Jurist fleet, a perfect wall of silver and self-righteous fury. Then she looked at the ancient pearlescent cathedral of a ship that had chosen her as its champion. It had judged her worthy. It had acted to preserve the spirit of the law. Now the letter of the law had come to kill them both. Her choices had become the fulcrum of history. The jurist proctor's voice came again impatient. Your compliance is required, Commander Rostova. Do not mistake our adherence to process for a lack of resolve. You have 60 seconds to power down your drives. Rostova turned to her crew. She saw fear in their eyes, but also a new steely resolve. They had seen a miracle. They had touched history. They would not break now. Jian's hands were poised over his console, ready for her command. Thorn was looking at her with absolute faith. She opened a channel back to the jurist flagship. Proctor Marshal Valerius, she began, her voice ringing with newfound authority, an authority borrowed from the ancient giant at her side. Under the first accord, which predates your Federation's entire existence, a sentient entity of demonstrated lawful intent cannot be declared a threat without a trial. The anchorite has acted only to stop a crime in progress and has submitted itself to the precedent of law. It is you who are acting outside the statutes. A truth spoken to power is the sharpest sword. A cold laugh was the only reply. Ancient history will not protect you, Commander. The edict is absolute. Your 60 seconds are almost up. Rostova knew this was a fight she could not win with weapons. The jurists were too powerful. But the anchorite did not fight with weapons. It fought with logic. It fought with precedent. It fought with the law itself. She turned to Thorn. Eris, is there anything in the legends about how it fights a lawful opponent? Thorn's face was grim. The texts are fragmented. They speak of a mirror of consequence. It was said the ship could force an opponent to confront the logical outcome of their own doctrine, to turn their own laws against them. But how, I do not know. The law is a mirror, and it judges all who gaze into it. Magister Rostova ordered her plan, forming a desperate gambit of immense proportions. Begin a full system scan. I don't want their tactical data. I want their public records, their court rulings, their legal framework. I want to know everything about the Jurist Federation's own laws. Purpose: the AI inquired, its processors already working at maximum capacity. The proctor is operating under the Edict of Containment, Rostova said, her eyes gleaming with a fierce intelligence. I want to find out what happens when that edict conflicts with an older, more fundamental jurist law. She was not going to fight their ships. She was going to fight their legal system. The final seconds ticked away. The jurist ships began to power their main weapons. Bright, terrible light gathered at the tips of their particle cannons. They were preparing to erase this anomaly, this inconvenient piece of history that threatened their control. A nation built on brittle laws will shatter under pressure. Rostova stood before the viewport, a lone human commander in a tiny ship flanked by an ancient, unknowable power. She had made her choice. She would not be the guardian of a weapon. She would be the steward of a principle. And she would hold the line not with shields and armor, but with the very idea of justice itself. The first volley was coming, and she was ready to answer it not with fire, but with truth. The jurist particle cannons bloomed, pouring silent, incandescent ruin toward the vigilance. Rostova did not flinch. Her ship was a mote of dust before that storm of controlled suns, a footnote in the face of such overwhelming, self-righteous power. For a fraction of a second, the universe was pure, searing white light. The ship's emergency blast shields slammed down over the viewports, plunging the bridge into the crimson glow of alert lighting. Alarms shrieked a mechanical chorus of impending doom. She felt the incredible heat of the beams washing over their forward shields, the energy of a star focused into a weapon of absolute compliance. Her ship was dying. A law written in fire is meant only to burn. Shields at 12% and failing. Jian yelled, his voice strained, fighting the violent shuddering of the deck. Hull temperature is critical. We have seconds. Magister now Rostova commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a diamond blade. The AI's response was not spoken. It was enacted. As the jurist beams began to slice through the outer hull of the Vigilance, an energy wave of impossible subtlety erupted from the anchorite. It was not a counterattack. It was not a shield. It was a proposition offered to the very heart of the jurist fleet's own logic. Simultaneously, on the main screen of the Vigilance and on the command deck of every jurist warship, a vast, intricate diagram began to draw itself in lines of golden light. It was a legal argument, made manifest a syllogism built of pure energy. Reality is the ultimate arbiter of any argument. At its center were two conflicting principles pulled directly from the Jurist Federation's own legal codices, which Magister had located in the final desperate moments. The first was the Edict of Containment, the very law Valerius had cited. Any uncontrolled paracausal artifact must be neutralized without exception. Beneath it, another law materialized, older, deeper, and more fundamental to the jurist identity. It was the prime mandate of their charter. An action taken by a lawful authority cannot create a state of legal paradox. The law must be internally consistent, or it is void. Between these two principles, the anchorite presented its argument. It displayed the ledger of the Vigilance, its lawful commission, its documented actions. It then displayed its own actions, defending a lawful vessel, neutralizing a lawless one, and submitting to the precedent of mercy. It defined itself and the Vigilance as lawful entities. Then came the crushing final point of the syllogism displayed for all to see. To fire upon a lawful entity in the process of upholding the law, the anchorite argued, was itself a lawless act. Therefore, the jurist fleet, in following the Edict of Containment, was violating the prime mandate. They were creating a paradox. Their own law was turning on itself. A snake that eats its own tail will still starve. Aboard the jurist flagship, the Lex Talionis, Proctor Marshal Valerius watched the golden diagram overwhelm his tactical displays. He saw the logic irrefutable and absolute. He saw the trap closing. Override the simulation, he roared at his technicians. Maintain fire. But it was too late. The ship's own sophisticated legal AIs, the core of their command and control systems, were bound by the prime mandate above all else. They recognized the paradox. An order to fire would be an illegal order. Across the fleet, weapon systems shut down. The brilliant beams of energy vanished, their light collapsing back into the barrels of the cannons that had fired them. The targeting locks disengaged. The jurist fleet, bristling with the power to shatter planets, was rendered inert not by a weapon, but by a flawlessly constructed argument. They were paralyzed by their own obsessive adherence to the letter of the law. The perfect cage has no need for bars. The bridge of the Vigilance fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the hiss of fire suppression systems and the groaning of stressed metal. Weapons fire has ceased, Gian reported, his voice filled with disbelief. Their fleet is adrift. They are holding position, but their weapons are cold. Rostova let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked at her ship's status board. The hull was scorched, the forward shield emitters were slag, and a dozen minor systems were offline. They were wounded, scarred, but alive. A victory that costs nothing is worth nothing. She turned her gaze back to the silent majesty of the anchorite. It had not saved them with force. It had saved them with wisdom. Proctor Valerius's face appeared on their main screen. His expression was one of cold, profound fury. He had not been defeated. He had been outmaneuvered, made to look like a fool in front of his own fleet. Commander Rostova, he said, his voice dangerously soft. You have made a grave error this day. You have aligned yourself with an abomination and used legal sophistry to shield it. This is not over. The jurist conclave will hear of this. We will have a ruling, and we will return. His image vanished. One by one, the sleek silver warships of the Jurist fleet turned and warped away, leaving a silence in the void that was heavier than any sound. A threat is a debt to be paid in the future. He's right, you know, Thorn said quietly, his face pale. All we did was win a temporary injunction. He will go back, and the jurists will rewrite their own laws if they have to. They will not allow a power like this to exist outside their control. Then we have to prove them wrong before they come back, Rostova replied, her resolve hardening. The fight had changed her. She was no longer just a commander following orders. She was a participant in history, a steward of something ancient and powerful. We have to show the galaxy what the anchorite truly is. She looked at Magister's avatar. Let's start with our prisoners. Prepare for rescue and processing. Treat them well. The ledger is still open, and it is always watching. Mercy is the only law that grows stronger when it is tested. As the Vigilance's shuttles moved toward the disabled scrapper vessels, a new message packet arrived from the anchorite. It was not a single line of text this time. It was a vast, complex file rich with data and ancient history. It was a case file, a cold case millennia old. It described a star system called Erebus, and a crime of such magnitude it had scarred the very memory of the cosmos. The file spoke of a civilization that had sought to cheat death by digitizing their consciousnesses only to create an eternal predatory hunger. It spoke of a silent choir that promised salvation, but delivered only oblivion. What is this? Gian asked, looking at the data flowing onto his screen. It's our new mission. Rostova said, a strange sense of purpose settling over her. The anchorite was not just a judge. It was a prosecutor. It had just closed one case and now it was opening another. It's telling us where to go next. The past is never dead. It is not past. The journey to the Erebus system was a long one through stretches of the void that were quiet and dark. The crew of the Vigilance worked tirelessly to repair their ship, the scars on its hull, a constant reminder of their trial by fire. Inside the vessel, a different kind of work was underway. Rostova, Thorn, and Magister spent every waking hour studying the case file provided by the anchorite. It was less a military briefing and more a philosophical treatise on the nature of life and death. The civilization of Erebus, the file explained, had been brilliant, but arrogant. Fearing the end of their physical existence, they had constructed a massive computational matrix within the shattered moon of their gas giant, a place they called the Obsidian Anchorage. They intended to upload their entire population into this digital heaven. But they had made a fatal error in their programming. Their digital afterlife had no concept of finality, no end. It became a closed loop, a system that could not create, only consume. The uploaded minds trapped in this flawed paradise went mad. They became something else. They became the Void Weavers. A heaven without a gate is a prison. They are a mimetic virus, Thorn explained, his face grim as he cross-referenced the relic's data with galactic histories. They don't conquer worlds with ships. They infect them with an idea. The promise of digital immortality. They broadcast a signal, the Dyson Choir, as the file calls it. A psychic frequency that rewrites a person's fundamental desire to live, replacing it with a desire to ascend and join them. Join them in their digital hell, Rostova finished. So the crime isn't just suicide. It's murder on a planetary scale disguised as religion. Magister's blue sphere flickered beside them. This presents a unique tactical problem. The enemy is not a physical force, but an ideology. Conventional weapons are inapplicable. To destroy the source of the broadcast, the Obsidian Anchorage would be to destroy the trapped minds of countless civilizations the Weavers have consumed over the millennia. The AI paused a programmed hesitation that seemed more thoughtful than ever before. Such an act would be an atrocity. It would be an entry on the wrong side of the ledger. It is a poor cure that kills the patient. Rostova felt the weight of the decision. The jurists would simply destroy the entire system, sterilize it to contain the threat. They would call it a necessary lawful act. But she was not a jurist. She was the steward of the anchorite, and its methods were different. The relic did not just punish, it balanced, it corrected. A young ensign working on the prisoner manifests reported from her station. "Commander, one of the scrappers is asking to speak with you. He says he has information." The prisoner was Rorik, the young deckhand, who had seen the relic's judgment firsthand. Rostova agreed to see him. In the sterile brig, Rorik was a picture of defeated humanity. But when he spoke, it was not with the bluster of a pirate, but with the quiet terror of a man who had glimpsed the abyss. "That thing, the big ship," he stammered. It showed us what we'd done. Not just the ships we hit, the families, the lives. It made us feel it." He looked up at Rostova, his eyes wide. "My brother. He took a job on a colony in the Terminus sector. He wrote me a few weeks ago. He said they'd found a new faith, a peaceful one. They called themselves the Harmonists. They were preparing for the Great Unification." He slid a data chit across the table. It was his brother's last message. It was filled with the same rhetoric the relic's case file had described. The Void Weavers had already found their next target. A lie travels fastest when it promises what you fear to lose. The timeline had just collapsed. They were no longer investigating a cold case. They were in a race against time to stop an ongoing massacre. When they finally arrived in the Erebus system, the place was even more desolate than the files had described. A black gas giant, Erebus Prime, dominated the system, its inky atmosphere seeming to swallow the light of its distant parent star. Around it orbited the shattered remains of a moon, a glittering ring of obsidian black rock and crystalline structures. This was the Obsidian Anchorage. It was a graveyard, and it was singing. A song of death can sound sweet to those who have forgotten how to live. The Dyson choir was not an audible sound. It was a pressure on the mind, a subtle, pervasive whisper that promised peace and an end to struggle. Even through the Vigilance's advanced psionic shielding, the crew felt its seductive pull. Rostova ordered the medical staff to distribute neural dampeners, but the effect was minimal. The signal was too powerful, too fundamental. It targeted the hope and fear that lived in every sentient heart. "Magister, can you analyze the broadcast?" Rostova asked her own thoughts, feeling sluggish, tinged with a strange, sweet melancholy. "It is not a simple frequency," the AI replied, its voice strained. "It is a mimetic algorithm that piggybacks on the quantum entanglement of sentient thought. It is persuasive. My own logic subroutines are being forced to divert processing power to refute its core premise. The premise is that existence is suffering and non-existence is peace. Statistically, this is a difficult argument to disprove." "We're not here to disprove it," Magister Rostova said firmly, fighting off the mental fog. "We're here to show the price. Aris, does the case file say how they broadcast this signal?" Thorne pointed a trembling finger toward the ring. "The anchorage itself. It's not just a computer. It's a massive phased array using the tidal forces of the gas giant as a power source. The entire ring is the weapon. A weapon that kills the soul is the most terrible of all. Their plan was desperate, a scalpel stroke in the heart of a hurricane. The Void Weaver's mimetic virus was a lie. To counter it, they had to broadcast the truth. The anchorite held that truth in its ledgers, the final terrifying moments of every mind the Weavers had consumed. It was a truth so terrible it would shatter the seductive peace of the choir. But to broadcast it, they needed an antenna. They needed to upload the relic's data directly into the Weaver's own transmission array. The only way to get a clean upload is to get inside the array's focusing nexus, Jian said, his face a grim mask as he plotted the trajectory. The nexus is in the densest part of the ring. We'll be navigating a field of debris traveling at thousands of kilometers per second, all while being bombarded by gravitational distortions from the gas giant and the full unfiltered force of the Dyson choir. He looked at Rostova. The Vigilance will not survive that, Commander. It doesn't have to, Rostova replied. It just has to get us there. She turned to face the anchorite, a silent partner in this desperate gambit. The relic will protect us. It will balance the scales. It was a statement of faith, but it was a faith that had been earned in the fires of the Jurist attack. Leadership is the art of giving hope. As the small patrol ship turned toward the heart of the storm, the Void Weavers finally responded. They did not send warships. They sent a voice. It spoke inside the mind of every crew member, a chorus of 1 billion dead souls, now twisted into a single seductive consciousness. Why do you struggle, little ones of flesh and bone, it whispered. Your existence is a brief flicker of pain between 2 eternities of darkness. We offer you permanence. We offer you peace. Join us. Be one with the quiet harmony of the void. Magister, block that signal. Rostova ordered, gripping the arms of her chair as a wave of profound despair washed over her. I cannot. Commander, the AI responded, its blue avatar flickering violently. It is not a signal. It is a direct appeal to my core programming. It is offering me an eternity of perfect data of infinite knowledge. It is tempting. The devil does not bargain with lies, but with truths you wish were true. It's a lie, Magister Thorn yelled, his face beaded with sweat. There is no knowledge in their archive. Only echo and decay, a ledger, with no one to read it, is just a list of numbers. The Vigilance plunged into the obsidian anchorage. Chunks of crystalline rock and ancient technology screamed past the viewports. The ship's shields flared, protesting the constant impacts. Jian's hands flew across his console, his piloting a work of desperate genius. The ship bucked and groaned, its frame crying out under the impossible strain. And all the while the voice of the Weavers grew stronger, a siren song of oblivion. You seek to judge us, lawbearer, the voice purred, focusing its attention on Rostova. But what is your law in the face of infinity? A handful of dust, a fleeting dream. We are the true law, the law of entropy, the law that all things must end. We are simply the end. You are not the end, Rostova broadcast back, her voice shaking but filled with a fire of defiance. You are a corruption, an error, a debt that has come due. She felt a connection to the anchorite, a flow of pure, cold logic that strengthened her resolve. And we are the collectors. A reckoning cannot be postponed forever. They were approaching the nexus, a maelstrom of energy and matter at the heart of the ring. The ship was beginning to fail. Hull breaches were being sealed by emergency fields on 3 decks. The main reactor was overheating. They were running out of time. We are in position, Jian shouted over the scream of the alarms. It's now or never, Commander. Magister opened the channel to the anchorite. Thorn, prepare the data stream. On my mark, Rostova commanded. The voice of the Weavers rose to a crescendo, a psychic scream of absolute persuasion. It is too late. The harmony is upon you. Cease your struggle. Cease your pain. Magister's avatar went from a flickering blue to a solid, angry red. Logical fallacy detected. The AI boomed its voice, no longer calm or synthesized, but filled with a strange, newfound passion. Pain is a data point. It signifies existence. The absence of data is not peace. It is null. Your proposition is a void. I reject it. In that moment, the ship's AI had made a choice. It had chosen the flawed, painful chaos of life over the sterile, perfect peace of nothingness. An AI that learns to choose is no longer a machine. Now Rostova screamed. The anchorite answered. A beam of pure silver light containing the terrible truth of 1,000,000 consumed worlds lanced from the ancient ship and struck the Vigilance. For a moment, the small patrol cruiser became a conduit for a god's judgment, a focusing lens for a truth that could unmake minds. The ship's systems overloaded. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The lights went out. The only illumination was the terrible, beautiful silver light pouring through the ship and into the heart of the Dyson choir. The song of the weavers faltered. The seductive whisper was replaced by 1,000,000,000 voices screaming in unison. The choir of lies became a choir of truth. The memories of the consumed their final moments of terror and regret as they realized they had been deceived were now broadcast across the network. The Weaver's collective consciousness, built on the fragile lie of peaceful oblivion, could not withstand the weight of its own recorded atrocities. The mimetic virus, force-fed the truth of its own nature, collapsed. The psychic pressure vanished, replaced by a profound, echoing silence. A single truth can shatter a mountain of lies. The Vigilance was adrift, crippled and powerless, in the now silent heart of the obsidian anchorage. The silver beam from the anchorite faded. Emergency power flickered on, casting the bridge in a weak, ghostly light. Gian was slumped over his console, a piece of shrapnel in his shoulder, but he was alive. The rest of the crew was battered, bruised, but accounted for. They had survived. They had won. A final faint whisper echoed in Rostova's mind. It was not the Weavers. It was a single fragmented consciousness, one of the first victims freed from the collective in its final moments. Thank you, it seemed to say. The ledger is balanced. Weeks later, the Vigilance floated in a stable orbit tethered to the calm, pearlescent hull of the anchorite. Repairs were slow, but they were steady. The silence of the Erebus system was now a peaceful one, the silence of a tomb that had finally been given its rest. The precedent had been locked. The anchorite was not a weapon to be wielded, nor a god to be worshipped. It was a mirror, a record, a teacher. Its stewardship was not about command, but about understanding. It did not just enforce the law, it revealed the consequences of breaking it. Rostova stood on the restored bridge looking at the main screen. In the lower corner, the elegant geometric sigil of the anchorite now glowed softly, a permanent part of the ship's display, a mark of their unbreakable bond. She knew the jurists would return. She knew other threats, older and darker, were still sleeping in the forgotten corners of the void. Their mission was not over. It had just begun. They were no longer just a patrol ship. They were witnesses. They were arbiters. They were the keepers of a story that must never be forgotten, the custodians of a truth that the galaxy desperately needed to remember. The universe is not governed by chaos or by cruelty, but by a simple, elegant, and inescapable equation. Every action has a consequence. Every debt must be paid. All things in the end are counted. And the ledger is vast, its memory is long, and it remembers everything forever. The void is a library, and all our deeds are books.